Emma had never been the type to believe in destiny. She trusted schedules, to-do lists, and the comfort of knowing what tomorrow would look like. Love, in her mind, was something you built carefully, like a puzzle with missing pieces that eventually clicked together. It wasn't supposed to arrive suddenly, crashing into her carefully constructed life like a wave. That was before she met Daniel. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in the city, the kind of rain that blurred windows and turned sidewalks into rivers. Emma had just left work late, exhausted, carrying her umbrella like a shield against the world. The subway was overcrowded, and she squeezed herself into a corner, resigned to standing for the long ride home. Daniel stepped in at the next stop. He was tall, carrying a worn leather bag, his hair damp from the rain. Something about him radiated calm, a steady presence in the chaos of the rush hour crowd. When the train jolted unexpectedly, Emma stumbled, nearly dropping her bag. "Careful," he said, catching her elbow lightly. His voice was warm, not loud, but enough to cut through the clatter of the train. "Thanks," Emma muttered, embarrassed, brushing her hair out of her face. Most strangers would have let go immediately, but he held her gaze for a fraction longer than necessary. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray, sharp yet kind, as if they carried entire stories she would never guess. The train rattled on, and silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of raindrops beating against the windows. Emma pretended to look at her phone, but her attention kept flickering back to him. Daniel, however, seemed perfectly at ease, watching the passing tunnel lights with the faintest trace of a smile. At the next station, the crowd shifted, pushing them closer together. Their umbrellas clashed awkwardly, and Emma laughed quietly. He looked at her, amused. "Sorry, rush hour has no respect for personal space," he joked. She smiled despite herself. "Tell me about it." It was a small exchange, nothing remarkable on the surface. Yet something in the way his words carried a softness, a familiarity, lingered. By the time her stop arrived, Emma felt a strange disappointment pressing on her chest. She didn't want the moment to end. As the doors opened, she stepped out, hesitated, and glanced back. He was still there, watching her leave, his expression unreadable. She almost said something, anything, but the doors slid shut between them. Emma walked home with the rain soaking her shoes, her thoughts tangled. She told herself it was nothing. Just a stranger. Just a fleeting kindness. And yet, when she lay in bed that night listening to the storm outside, she replayed the sound of his voice, the steadiness of his gaze, over and over again. It was the kind of beginning she would never have written into her plans. And sometimes, the best stories are the ones you don't plan. 2 weeks passed, and Emma convinced herself she had imagined the whole thing. It was just a stranger, a fleeting encounter, nothing more. Life had a way of reminding her to focus. Long hours at the office, emails stacked higher than her coffee cups, deadlines that swallowed entire evenings. And yet, when she stepped onto the subway each day, she couldn't help scanning the crowd. Gray eyes, tall frame, a worn leather bag. She looked for him without admitting it to herself. Nothing. The city was too big, too fast. She told herself to let it go. Until the bookstore. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that begged for warmth and quiet. Emma ducked into her favorite independent bookstore, the one with shelves that leaned slightly and the smell of old paper drifting like a second air. She had gone there countless times, but this time, fate seemed to be waiting. She was in the fiction aisle, running her fingers along spines, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Any recommendations?" She froze. Slowly she turned, and there he was. Daniel. His hair was dry this time, but his eyes, those same calm gray eyes, held the same unshakable steadiness. He looked both exactly the same and somehow different, like the universe had sharpened his features just for her. Emma blinked, her heart stuttering. "You..." He smiled as if he'd expected her. "Me." It was ridiculous, standing in a bookstore aisle with her pulse racing like she'd just run a mile. She tried to collect herself, clutching the nearest book without looking. It happened to be a romance novel with a particularly pink cover. Daniel glanced at it, raised an eyebrow. "Bold choice." Emma groaned. This isn't..." She dropped the book back onto the shelf, mortified, and he laughed. Not unkindly, but warmly, the sound filling the space between them. "I'm Daniel," he said, offering his hand. "Emma." The handshake was brief, but it left a spark, subtle yet undeniable. She wondered if he felt it too, though he gave no sign, only that same faint smile. They ended up walking through the aisles together, trading book titles like secrets. He confessed he was terrible at finishing novels, always distracted by work. She admitted she had a bad habit of reading the last page first, just to know how things ended. He teased her for it, calling it literary cheating. But his grin softened the words. When they reached the counter, Daniel hesitated, as if weighing something. "There's a cafe nearby," he said finally, "if you're not in a rush." Emma wasn't. At least, not anymore. They sat across from each other at a small corner table, the smell of coffee weaving between their words. Conversation flowed in a way that startled her. Easy, unforced, like they'd known each other longer than an hour. He told her he worked as an architect, loved sketching buildings but hated the paperwork. She told him about her marketing job, her love for stories in any form, books, films, even overheard conversations on the subway. By the time the cups were empty, evening light spilled through the cafe windows. Emma glanced at her watch and realized hours had slipped by. Daniel leaned back, studying her. Funny, isn't it? Two strangers on a crowded train, and now here Emma's lips curved before she could stop them. Maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe, he said softly, it's something more. The words hung between them, fragile but electric. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing at all. But in her silence, she knew. Her carefully planned life had just shifted, and she wasn't sure she wanted it to shift back. The week after the bookstore meeting, Emma found herself thinking about Daniel constantly. It was surprising, almost alarming. She had always prided herself on rationality, on keeping emotions in neat boxes. And yet she kept replaying every word, every glance, every subtle smile they had shared. When his text appeared on her phone that Wednesday evening, she nearly dropped it. Coffee again? Or maybe a proper dinner this time? Her heart raced as she typed back a simple, yes. It felt like opening a door to something she couldn't yet name, but didn't want to resist. Their first official date was at a small Italian bistro downtown, the kind of place with flickering candlelight, walls covered in faded photographs, and music, soft enough to make conversation feel like the only sound in the room. Emma arrived early, nervous, smoothing the fabric of her dress, rehearsing sentences she would never need. Daniel appeared moments later, looking effortlessly composed, as though he had nothing to prove. He greeted her with that calm smile, the one that made her forget every anxious thought she had rehearsed. Dinner flowed easily, the awkwardness of first dates dissolving in shared laughter. Daniel had a habit of noticing small details, how she twirled her pasta, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, her soft laugh at a bad joke. Emma found herself revealing more than she usually would. Stories of childhood summers, awkward teenage moments, and secret dreams she had barely admitted to herself. After dinner, they walked through the city streets, the evening air crisp and scented with rain from earlier in the day. The city felt different with him by her side, as if the ordinary had been transformed into something intimate, private. At the park, Daniel stopped near a fountain, its water glittering in the streetlights. "Emma," he said, quietly, "I'm not sure where this will go. But I know I want to know you better." Really better, Emma's chest tightened. She had felt sparks before, fleeting moments that didn't last. But this was something steadier, something warmer. "I want that too," she admitted. Their first kiss was tentative, gentle, a testing of waters neither of them wanted to rush. But it carried a promise, a hint of the connection that would grow over the months to come. Emma felt a strange certainty. She had met someone who might just change everything. Over the next few weeks, they found themselves in a rhythm that was exhilarating yet comforting. Coffee in the mornings, long walks through the city, sharing playlists, swapping books. Every small gesture felt meaningful, a thread weaving their lives closer together. There were awkward moments, of course, miscommunications, hesitant touches, moments of shyness. But those were outweighed by laughter, curiosity, and the thrill of discovering someone who seemed to mirror her own heart in unexpected ways. By the end of the third week, Emma realized she had stopped checking her schedule first thing in the morning. Instead, she checked her phone, hoping for a message from Daniel, and when it came, her heart jumped, not with anxiety, but with anticipation. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to find out. By the time the first month passed, Emma and Daniel had settled into an unspoken rhythm. Their interactions were no longer just exciting first dates, they were familiar, comfortable, and thrilling all at once. Emma marveled at how someone could become both a surprise and a constant presence in such a short time. One rainy Sunday, Daniel invited her to his apartment to cook together. Emma had never been particularly skilled in the kitchen, but she agreed anyway, drawn by the warmth of the invitation. Daniel's small apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old books, a cozy, lived-in space that made her feel unexpectedly at home. They chopped vegetables side by side, occasionally brushing hands, laughing when one accidentally dropped an ingredient. Daniel teased her about her overzealous chopping, and she retaliated by flicking a tiny piece of carrot at him, laughing when it landed on his shirt. As the meal simmered on the stove, they shared stories they hadn't yet told anyone. Daniel spoke of his childhood in a small town, of summers spent sketching old barns and tree-lined streets. Emma shared her own memories, the small triumphs and failures that had shaped her cautious heart. With each story, a layer peeled back, revealing the core of who they were. After dinner, they sat on the couch, sharing a blanket and sipping wine. The room was quiet except for the soft music playing in the background, and the occasional sound of rain tapping against the window. Emma leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you ever wonder if we met too soon or too late?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel turned slightly to look at her, his eyes calm and honest. "I don't think timing matters with some things. Some people come into your life and it just works. No calculations, no plans, just..." He hesitated, then smiled softly. "Just right." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she let herself believe in something unplanned, uncalculated, something real. But love, even in its purest form, is never without its small challenges. The following week, Daniel's work became hectic. Deadlines loomed, and he was forced to cancel a date they had been eagerly anticipating. Emma felt a twinge of disappointment, but she understood. Life didn't always wait for romance. Still, the absence made her realize how much she had come to rely on him, not just for fun, but for comfort, laughter, and connection. She missed the little things, his gentle teasing, the way he always knew when she needed a quiet moment, the spark in his eyes when he laughed at her corniest jokes. Their next date was a quiet picnic in the park, with sandwiches and coffee wrapped in a checked cloth. It rained again, of course, but this time they didn't care. They laughed under a shared umbrella, soaked through and smiling, and it struck Emma how effortlessly they fit together, even in chaos. By the end of the day, as the sun broke through the clouds and cast golden light over wet leaves, Emma realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or flawless timing. It was about shared moments, vulnerability, and the courage to be imperfect together. And as she walked home later that evening, her heart light despite the drizzle, she knew this was just the beginning of something far deeper than either of them had anticipated. Spring had arrived, painting the city in shades of green and gold, but for Emma, the season brought an unexpected turbulence. Daniel's work had intensified, with long hours and last-minute projects consuming his days. Their messages became shorter, phone calls rushed. The once effortless connection now required conscious effort to maintain. Emma tried not to overthink it. She reminded herself that life sometimes demanded focus, that Daniel's ambition was part of the man she admired. Still, a quiet ache began to form in her chest, a worry that their growing closeness could be derailed by circumstances beyond their control. One Friday evening, after a particularly draining week at the office, Emma arrived at Daniel's apartment hoping for comfort. Instead, she found him hunched over his laptop, exhaustion written across his face. He looked up and smiled, but it was strained, apologetic. "I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't mean to cancel again. But this project..." His voice trailed off. She nodded, forcing a smile. "I understand. I just miss us, that's all." Daniel reached for her hand, a fleeting touch that carried both reassurance and guilt. "I miss it too," he admitted. "I promise once this deadline passes, we'll have time." Just a little longer, Emma left that night with a heavy heart. She knew he was right, but the distance, though temporary, stung. For the first time, she confronted a question she hadn't dared ask herself. Could love survive the pressures of real life, the inevitable interruptions and delays? The weekend brought more complications. A misunderstanding over a text message sparked a minor argument. Words that were meant as jokes felt sharp, small insecurities surfaced. Emma found herself questioning not Daniel, but the fragility of this new yet profound connection. It was on Sunday afternoon that clarity arrived. Emma decided to meet him at a quiet cafe they had discovered weeks earlier. She arrived first, nerves thrumming, and waited, watching the rain streak the windows. When Daniel walked in, his tired eyes immediately sought hers. They sat across from each other, a silence heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Daniel reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "Emma," he said softly, "I don't want us, to falter. I can't promise it will always be easy, but I can promise that I'm here. Fully, no excuses." Emma's eyes welled up. She realized that love wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about facing them together. "I'm here too," she whispered. And in that small, rain-soaked cafe, they rediscovered the rhythm that had drawn them together in the first place: laughter, vulnerability, and the unspoken certainty that they belonged in each other's lives. From that day on, they learned to navigate the small storms of life, understanding that obstacles were not signs of weakness, but opportunities to grow stronger, together. By the time spring turned into early summer, Emma felt a renewed sense of hope. Love, she realized, was not just about perfect days or unbroken moments. It was about commitment, resilience, and the courage to choose each other, again and again, even when life made it hard. Summer arrived in full bloom, draping the city in sunlight and warmth. For Emma and Daniel, it felt like the season itself reflected the growing closeness between them. Their once tentative gestures had become natural, effortless, a silent understanding that needed no words. One evening, Daniel invited Emma to a small rooftop garden atop his apartment building. Twinkling lights hung overhead, and the city sprawled below in a mosaic of streetlights and shadows. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, mingling with the soft hum of distant traffic. Emma followed him, heart fluttering with anticipation. "It's beautiful," she whispered, looking around at the lush greenery and the intimate setup he had arranged. A small blanket, a bottle of wine, and 2 glasses awaited them. Daniel smiled at her reaction, his gray eyes soft. "I thought you might like it," he said, handing her a glass. "Just us tonight. No distractions." They sat close, their shoulders brushing, fingers intertwining as they talked about everything and nothing. Stories of childhood mischief, dreams unspoken, fears they had never shared with anyone else. Each confession drew them closer, layer by layer. At one point, Daniel reached for Emma's hand, bringing it gently to his lips. "I love discovering you," he murmured. "Every little detail, every hidden corner of who you are." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of awe and tenderness. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. For the first time in her life, she realized that intimacy wasn't only physical, it was the trust, the shared silences, the knowledge that someone truly saw you. Later, as the night deepened and the city lights flickered below, Daniel traced gentle patterns on her hand with his thumb. "I don't want this to be temporary," he said softly. "I want to be here, with you, fully." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I want that too," she admitted. "I don't know how it happened, but I feel like I've known you far longer than I actually have, and I don't want to let go." They stayed on the rooftop until the stars blinked into existence, the world shrinking to the warmth of each other's presence. In that quiet space, free from expectations, deadlines, and the chaos of life below, they found a truth that transcended words. That love was not just a feeling, but a choice made again and again, in small gestures, shared laughter, and the courage to be vulnerable. When they finally descended to the streets below, hands still entwined, Emma realized that something within her had shifted. She no longer feared the unpredictability of life or the unknowns of love. With Daniel, every uncertainty became an adventure, every challenge a shared journey. That night, walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, Emma felt a sense of peace she had never known. For the first time, love wasn't something to be analyzed or tamed. It was something to be lived, breathed, and embraced, moment by moment. And in that realization, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Autumn arrived with a chill in the air, painting the city in amber and gold. For Emma and Daniel, the season brought not just beauty but challenges they hadn't anticipated. Life, they were learning, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Daniel had been offered an opportunity to lead a major project in another city, one that could define his career. The offer was irresistible professionally, but it came with a weighty cost: long hours, frequent travel, and the possibility of being physically distant from Emma for weeks at a time. Emma, who had grown so accustomed to his constant presence, felt a pang of anxiety she couldn't ignore. She wanted him to succeed, of course, but the thought of mornings without his smile, evenings without his laughter, filled her with a subtle dread. One evening, as they sat on his couch, the city lights shimmering outside, Daniel broke the news. "Emma, I've been offered the lead on a major project in Boston," he said, his voice tight. It's what I've been working toward for years." Emma's stomach knotted. She forced a smile, trying to mask the swirl of fear and uncertainty. "That's amazing," she said quietly. I'm proud of you. He reached for her hand, but she hesitated before taking it. I don't want this to change us, she admitted, her voice trembling. Daniel's eyes softened. It won't, he promised, though even he seemed uncertain. We'll find a way. We always do. The weeks that followed were difficult. Travel schedules meant brief, rushed phone calls and text messages filled with partial conversations. Emma found herself lying awake at night, wondering if distance would erode the bond they had nurtured so carefully. Daniel, despite his best efforts, arrived home tired, distracted, unable to fully immerse himself in their moments together. A misunderstanding at a cafe, an innocuous comment, overheard and misinterpreted, triggered a tense argument that neither of them wanted, yet both needed to address. Words were exchanged, harsh at first, then softened as apologies were made. The fight left them exhausted, but strangely stronger, aware of their vulnerabilities and the need for honest communication. One rainy evening, Emma found herself walking along the familiar city streets, lost in thought. Her phone buzzed. Daniel's message. Meet me at the park? When she arrived, he was there, drenched, hands shoved in his coat pockets, looking both anxious and hopeful. Without a word, they sat on a bench under a sheltering tree, letting the rain mask the awkward silence. Finally, Daniel spoke. I know it's hard, he admitted. I know the distance, the stress. It's not fair to you. But I don't want to lose what we have. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't want that either, she whispered. We'll figure it out. Together, and in that quiet, rain-soaked moment, they realized something crucial. Love was not only about joy and shared laughter. It was about patience, forgiveness, and the courage to stay committed even when life threatened to pull them apart. The storm passed, as all storms do, leaving behind a stronger foundation. Emma and Daniel knew that the trials they faced were temporary, but the trust they built would endure. It was a lesson in resilience and a reminder that even shadows could be weathered when hearts were aligned. Winter's first snow blanketed the city in quiet white, turning familiar streets into a magical landscape. For Emma and Daniel, it marked a season of intimacy and reflection, a time when their relationship deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They spent weekends exploring the city, wrapped in scarves and laughter. Snowball fights in the park, hot chocolate in cozy cafes, and long walks where their footprints intertwined in the fresh snow became their ritual. Every shared smile, every gentle touch, strengthened the trust and understanding between them. One evening, Daniel surprised Emma with a trip to a small cabin just outside the city, tucked away among evergreens. Just us, he said, eyes sparkling. No phones, no distractions. I thought we could slow down. Emma's heart fluttered with anticipation. The cabin was warm, the fire crackling as they settled inside, wrapped in a blanket together. Daniel held her close, their hands entwined, and for the first time, silence was not awkward. It was comforting. I've been thinking, Daniel said softly, about how much you've changed my life in such a short time. I never knew love could feel this complete. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way, she whispered. I've never trusted anyone like I trust you. They spent the night talking and sharing stories, each revelation weaving them closer together. Daniel confessed fears he rarely voiced, insecurities about his career, doubts about being enough for her. Emma, in turn, opened up about her past heartbreaks, the times she had doubted herself, the walls she had built to protect her heart. Daniel listened without judgment, only tenderness. And in that listening, Emma felt the depth of their connection. Trust, she realized, was not just about honesty. It was about the courage to be vulnerable and the certainty that the other would not turn away. Later, under the soft glow of the fire, Daniel traced her face with his fingers, memorizing every line, every expression. I want to be here, he said, not just for the easy days, but for all of them. With you, Emma leaned into him, her heart full. And I want the same, no matter what comes. The snow fell gently outside, but inside, time seemed suspended. They laughed, whispered, and simply existed in each other's presence. It was a night without plans, without distractions, yet it felt monumental, a memory that would linger, a turning point in the story they were building together. By the time they returned to the city, Emma knew that their bond had reached a new depth. Love was no longer just about joy or excitement. It was about unwavering support, shared vulnerability, and the quiet certainty that they would face the world together. Winter's chill could not touch them. In each other, they had found warmth, resilience, and a promise that would endure far beyond the season. Spring returned, bringing light and renewal, but for Emma and Daniel, it was a season of choices and change. Daniel's career was reaching a new peak. The project that had taken him away for months was finally concluding, offering him recognition and new opportunities. At the same time, Emma faced a crossroads in her own life, with a promotion that demanded travel and long hours. Her dream, yet one that could complicate their carefully nurtured relationship. The tension was subtle at first. Quiet conversations about future plans, tentative suggestions about moving closer, careful negotiations about time spent together. They both wanted the other to succeed, but they also feared losing the closeness that had become essential to their lives. One evening, they sat on the balcony of Daniel's apartment, the city buzzing below, the air warm with spring blooms. Emma's hand rested lightly on his, their fingers intertwined. "I've been thinking," she began, hesitant. "What happens if we both take these opportunities? We might barely see each other." Daniel squeezed her hand, thoughtful. "We'll figure it out," he said. "We've faced distance before, and we survived. But we need to be honest about what we want, about what we're willing to compromise." The conversation stretched long into the night, honest and raw. They spoke of fears, of ambitions, of dreams that sometimes conflicted with reality. They argued, sometimes sharply, but always with love at the core. By the end, there was clarity. They would support each other fully, even if it meant challenges, but they would never let ambition replace the foundation of their relationship. A few weeks later, Daniel surprised Emma with a weekend getaway, a quiet cabin by a lake, reminiscent of their first intimate trip together. There, away from the city's chaos, they celebrated their bond. They spoke of commitment, trust, and the life they were building. "It's not about where we are," Daniel said, looking into her eyes. "It's about who we're with." Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of certainty. "Then I choose us," she whispered. It was in these moments, small, deliberate, and full of intention, that they realized love wasn't passive. It required decisions, compromises, and courage. They knew that life would continue to test them, but they had learned to navigate the storms together, to celebrate victories, and to cherish quiet, intimate moments that no one else would understand. By the time they returned to the city, their hearts were lighter, strengthened by both vulnerability and trust. They were no longer just a couple discovering each other. They were partners, ready to face life's turning points side by side. Emma looked at Daniel on the subway ride home that evening, and for the first time, she felt truly prepared for whatever came next. They had endured, they had grown, and together, they were unstoppable. Summer had returned, warm and golden, signaling not only the passage of time but the growth of something enduring. Emma and Daniel had navigated months of challenges, distance, career demands, and personal fears. Now they were stronger, closer, and more certain than ever of what they shared. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Daniel led Emma to the park where they had shared their first picnic together months ago. The air was soft with early sunlight, the scent of blooming flowers drifting through it. Trees. Emma noticed something different this time, an anticipation that made her heart flutter. Daniel knelt before her, holding a small velvet box in his hands. His eyes were steady, reflecting every emotion he had ever shared with her: love, admiration, trust, and hope. "Emma," he began, his voice unwavering, "these past months I've discovered what I've known all along, that life is better, brighter, and more meaningful with you by my side. I want to continue every moment, every challenge, every joy with you. Will you marry me?" Emma's breath caught. She stared, overwhelmed by a surge of emotion: relief, joy, love, and a profound certainty. The world around her seemed to pause, holding its breath with her. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak at first. "Yes," she whispered finally. "Yes, Daniel." 1,000 times. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, their hands trembling with excitement and tenderness. They embraced, the city fading away around them, leaving only the two of them, bound by a love that had grown through trials, trust, laughter, and countless shared moments. The months that followed were a celebration of their commitment. Friends and family witnessed the bond they had forged, a love that had endured uncertainty, distance, and the mundane pressures of life. The engagement wasn't just a promise, it was a recognition of the journey they had shared and the future they were ready to build together. On the day of their wedding, as Emma walked down the aisle, she thought of the crowded subway, the bookstore, and the small cafe where they had first confronted their fears. Each memory was a testament to the unpredictable, beautiful course of life that had brought them together. Daniel's gaze met hers, calm and full of love, and she knew that every step of their journey, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet nights, the moments of vulnerability, had led to this moment. Their story, once tentative and uncertain, had become a masterpiece written with patience, courage, and an unwavering choice to love. As they exchanged vows, promising to face life together, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. Love, she realized, was not perfect. It was messy, challenging, and at times frightening. But it was also the most beautiful force in the world when shared with someone who truly saw you. And as they kissed, sealing their promise, she knew, without doubt, that their love would endure, grow, and flourish forever. Life's storms, joys, and ordinary moments would come and go, but their hearts were intertwined in a story that would never end. Emma and Daniel walked into the future hand in hand, ready to face everything together. Their love, a constant, radiant force that would guide them always. That's all for now, but stay with us for more.